Chancellor, it's wonderful to have you joining us on CNBC. Thank you so much for taking the time. I just want to get you to follow on to what we just heard from President Zelensky. He was essentially calling on Europe, calling on the United States to sanction Putin now before he has the chance to invade Ukraine. How do you respond to that?
We are supporting Ukraine with a lot of financial means in the past, and Germany is doing this, I think, as the biggest donator in the past. The European Union is doing its job. The United States are doing many others just for producing economic resilience. And on the other hand, we are absolutely prepared for a situation of a military aggression against Ukraine, saying Putin that if Russia invades Ukraine, this would have consequences, and that we are ready to take decisions on sanctions. And different to the situations we had before, we are well prepared. We could take the decision in a very short time after an invasion would have taken place. And this is very helpful to my point of view, because it's better to say we do it then instead of doing it now, because we want to avoid the situation. We want to go into a direction where peace is having a chance.
Yeah. Ursula von der Leyen says when it comes to the potential sanctions, everything's on the table. Mario Draghi has pushed back and said energy sanctions should not be on the agenda. Where does Germany stand?
We are working intensely with the United States, with the European Union, with our alliance partners in NATO on the concrete measures for sanctions, and we are nearly ready. But my view is that it makes no sense to make them public. It is good for what we expect to get, that the Russian government cannot be really sure what exactly we will do. So we will not speak about
the element of the surprise.
Yeah, it is. I think there is enough intelligence in this world. They will know approximately what we are discussing about.
Is Gazprom part of that conversation?
But they will not know it exactly. And this is what is very good. So we will decide on the sanctions and publish them when the situation is there. But now we are doing all we can to avoid it and to convince all that are now acting to go into talks about all the questions, transparency of military maneuvers, arms control, the question of European security, and obviously how we can solve the conflict in Ukraine. We have an agenda which is linked to this Normandy format and the agreements of Minsk, and we are trying to convince all parties involved that they do their part of the job, that this trilateral talks between the OSCE, Ukraine and Russia, and representatives of the region sitting aside, discussing about the proposals the Ukrainian government is making, and they are ready to do so.
When I spoke with President Putin back in October, he told me that he has a trust deficit with the West, with NATO members. You just spoke with him in Moscow. Do you believe the West and Germany can trust the word of Vladimir Putin?
First, he can trust us. NATO is not aggressive. The European Union is not. We are not willing to threaten Russia and to fight against them with action and activities. The development of Russia is a question of the Russian society. And so he can be absolutely safe that nothing is harming him. If the only thing is that we have to convince him that he is not doing this military aggression. And what we are working for is that we get agreements. He is asking for agreements. And when we have them, we should trust that all parties are sticking to them.
So you believe you can trust Vladimir Putin?
We have to work with the world and the countries that are really existing. And if we have an agreement, I'm sure that this would make it feasible that all are sticking to it.
There's been a lot of question globally about Germany over the last several weeks. And many would say that Germany is NATO's weakest link. How do you respond to that? Because it's a question of reputation.
Germany is the strongest continental power in Europe. We have increased our military and defense spending really dramatically in the last years. It's since I became the finance minister in the earlier government, it's an increase from about of about 36%, which is quite a lot. And we are still working on doing this job. On the other hand, we are the ones that are supporting, for instance, the Ukrainians with all the necessary means. We are doing our job in NATO with our troops in Lithuania, with air policing in the Baltic states and Romania and all this. And the people know it and they can rely on us.
NATO's Secretary General has said multiple times in the last several days that we're now facing a new normal in Europe, a new security dynamic. For Germany, do you believe that that new normal will decrease the pacifism, not just in government, but also in the general public?
The people in Europe want peace, and this is our task as leaders to work hard to make this possible.
Sometimes peace isn't an option.
And on the other hand, we have to be prepared. This is why we are united as partners in the NATO. This is why we are working together in the European Union. And as a country right in the center of the European Union with more than 80 million people, with a very strong GDP and a very good defense structure, we will play our part for being prepared for a difficult situation. But the task of the aim of all what we do is peace, making this feasible. And this is why we are not just discussing about what might happen if there is a military threat to Ukraine, but also on the same time working on how we can find an arrangement between NATO and Russia, between the United States and Russia. And this would keep peace in Europe much better.
Before I let you go, just one question on Nord Stream 2. Many would say that that's just the latest example of how Germany is supporting business and its economic interests at potentially the expense of its security. How do you respond to that?
Germany is the country that will leave the use of fossil resources relatively soon. We are now increasing our production of electricity with renewables enormously. We are doing this within 25 years, and this will change the scenario completely. Having a CO2 neutral industry, which is not relying on imports of gas and oil and coal. And this is the same with all the other European countries that are relying on gas or on coal and oil. And I hope that this will change the world and make it a bit more safe on the one hand. On the other hand, we are the ones that are doing the necessary things. And I already informed you about the strong financial support we gave, for instance, to the Ukraine. And it's very helpful if we understand that the economic resilience and economic stability of Ukraine is of essence if they want to have a chance to rule their own country as a democracy.
But until that time, they've still got to rely on the revenues they make off that Ukrainian pipeline, which ships Russian gas to Europe. And many would say that Nord Stream 2 has essentially not only allowed President Putin to use energy as a weapon on Europe, but also has undermined Ukraine's sovereignty.
It is clear that we are taking care of gas transit via Ukraine. And what not all people really know, that there are a lot of pipelines coming from Russia to Europe and serving gas to Europe. The one via Ukraine is, we know, there is another that is going through Belarus and Poland, and there is another one that is going through the Baltic Sea, and some others. Yeah. And so we are working very hard to make gas transits via Ukraine something that has a good future. For having an enlargement of this gas transit arrangement, we worked very hard to make this happen in the past. And now we are already started working very hard to have a good gas transit agreement for Ukraine with Russia when the next period will start. And this is our responsibility we always took, to make gas transit a question that works through all the pipelines we have, and especially the Ukrainian one. But now we are working on peace, and this is what we do at this time.
Was Nord Stream 2, in retrospect, then a mistake? $11 billion, a massive deal.
I think that there is a lot of exports of oil, coal, and gas from Russia to many countries. There is also a big import of oil to the United States, as you know. And so we all have to work very hard to produce a situation where we have alternatives as necessary, but that we also make it feasible that there is good cooperation, that we come back to a situation where there is not this confrontation, but where we have a situation where Europe could develop in a peaceful manner, and that we can have a strong development of the European Union, that we have a good cooperation with our neighbors, and this is what we are working for.
Chancellor, thank you so much for joining CNBC.
Thank you.